lying in that sterile hospital bed, staring at my mangled, useless hands that could no longer hold a paring knife, let alone run a kitchen. And right there, looming over me, was Jude, his chef's whites gleaming, arm in arm with my weeping stepsister, Gwen. "It was a tragic accident, Brie," she had sobbed, her grip on his bicep a little too tight. "But don't worry, Jude will keep the restaurant running. Your recipes are safe with us." Safe. Right. They had orchestrated the hit and run, stolen a decade of my culinary research, and gaslit me into an early, miserable grave. I died choking on the realization that I was nothing but a blood bag for two talentless clout-chasers. I blinked, and the cold hospital room shattered. The sharp scent of perfectly seared wagyu and white truffle hit my senses. I wasn't dead. I was standing in the middle of an absurdly expensive private dining room. Soft jazz played in the background. Jude was down on one knee, holding a velvet box, sweating through his tailored suit. Sitting on the table behind him was my signature dish, the exact same dish he would later claim as his own invention to secure his first Michelin star. It was Jude's 28th birthday, the night he proposed, and right on cue, I heard the sharp, pathetic intake of breath to my left. It was Gwen. Her eyes were already brimming with those perfectly engineered, glossy tears. In my past life, this was the exact moment she threw a hysterical fit, confessed her undying love for Jude in front of our entire family, and manipulated the room until I looked like the cold, unfeeling villain for getting mad. Not this time. I stared down at Jude, then shifted my gaze to Gwen. Her bottom lip quivered. She was ready to launch into her victim monologue. Instead, I let a slow, chilling smile spread across my face. "You want the trash, Gwen? Go ahead, take the whole dumpster." "Jude," I said, my voice softer than spun sugar. I took a deliberate step back, leaving him kneeling there like an idiot. The entire room went dead silent. My dad, Paul, dropped his fork. My stepmother, Ruth, froze with a wine glass halfway to her mouth. "Brie?" Jude faltered, his perfectly practiced, charming smile twitching at the corners. "What's wrong? It's a flawless diamond." "It's beautiful," I cooed, tilting my head. I walked over to Gwen and gently grabbed her trembling shoulders. I could feel her muscles tense under my touch. She looked at me like I was holding a live grenade, but I can't accept it. Not when I know who your heart really beats for. Gwen choked on her spit. "Sister? What are you?" "Shh." I hushed her, brushing a fake tear from her cheek. "I've seen the way you look at him, Gwen. I've seen the late-night texts. The lingering touches. I hadn't. Not in this timeline yet, but the suffocating silence in the room told me I had struck a nerve." Jude's face drained of color. "Love can't be forced. I'd rather walk away than stand in the way of true love. I'm stepping aside. You two deserve each other." "Brie, you're being hysterical," Ruth snapped, her maternal mask slipping for a microsecond before she forced a concerned frown. "Jude is proposing to times you." "I'm being generous, Ruth," I corrected, my tone dripping with venomous politeness. I looked back at Jude, who was now awkwardly scrambling to his feet, clutching the velvet box like a lifeline. "Happy birthday, Jude. Enjoy the gift." Without waiting for their jaws to hit the floor, I turned on my heel and walked out. The heavy mahogany doors shut behind me, severing me from the toxic wasteland I used to call a family. My inner monologue was practically doing backflips. Face-slapping them with the high road was intoxicating. I didn't waste a single second. I took a cab straight back to the apartment I shared with Jude and packed my life into 2 suitcases. Clothes, passport, my favorite knives. I left the expensive jewelry. I left the designer bags. And, right in the center of the kitchen island, perfectly illuminated by the pendant light, I left my leather-bound recipe notebook. Dragging my luggage out into the crisp night air, the adrenaline finally began to ebb, replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. I needed a kitchen. I needed a base of operations. "Watch your step." The voice was deep, laced with a natural chill that made the hairs on my arms stand up. I stopped dead in my tracks. Standing under the glow of a street lamp, lighting a cigarette, was Vance. He was wearing a simple black chef's jacket, leaning against the brick wall of a narrow alleyway. In my past life, he was an enigma, the underground culinary genius, Jude's estranged, adopted older brother, and the only man who had ever truly seen my talent. He was also the man who had taken a knife to the shoulder for me when a disgruntled line cook went berserk. Vance exhaled a plume of smoke, his dark eyes locking onto my suitcases, then drifting up to meet my gaze. He didn't ask if I was okay. He didn't offer empty platitudes. He just looked at me, dissecting my composure with terrifying precision. "Leaving the sinking ship?" he asked, his voice a low rumble. "Setting it on fire, actually," I replied, a genuine smirk breaking through my cold facade. Vance paused, the cherry of his cigarette burning bright in the dark. A subtle, almost imperceptible smirk mirrored mine. "Need a match?" Meanwhile, back at the apartment, the door clicked open. Jude and Gwen stumbled in, still reeling from the evening's public humiliation, but undeniably buzzing with a twisted sense of victory. "She's actually gone," Gwen breathed, dropping her innocent act the second the door locked. Her eyes darted around the room and landed instantly on the kitchen island. She lunged for it like a starving animal. "Jude, look!" Jude practically sprinted over, his eyes wide with greed as he stared at the leather-bound notebook. She left it. The stupid bitch actually left her master notebook. Gwen flipped it open, her fingers trembling with excitement as she traced the handwritten ink. "The truffle wagyu, the signature sauces. It's all here. Jude, we don't need her anymore. With this, you're going to be a superstar." They clutched the book together, laughing in the empty kitchen, completely oblivious to the ticking time bomb in their hands. They didn't know that 3 hours ago, I had rewritten the core formulas. I had meticulously tweaked the pH balances, swapped stabilizers, and introduced clashing proteins into my best recipes. Go ahead, Jude. Cook for the critics. Steal my spotlight. I can't wait to watch it blow up right in your pathetic face. The internet absolutely loves a tragic hero. By noon the next day, Jude had already posted a heavily filtered, black and white selfie on Instagram. He was staring pensively out a rain-streaked window, jaw clenched. The caption read, "Sometimes the heart you try to protect is the one that breaks yours. Taking time to heal. Thank you for the support." I nearly choked on my double espresso. The audacity was a Michelin star performance all on its own. My phone had been vibrating off the counter for 48 hours. Most of it was my father, Paul, leaving exhausted, guilt-tripping voicemails. "Brie, please pick up. Your mother is beside herself. Gwen hasn't stopped crying in her room. You know how fragile your sister is. Why did you have to make such a cruel scene? We can fix this if you just apologize." Ah, Ruth's impeccable handiwork. My dear stepmother was a masterclass in weaponized victimhood. She had seamlessly spun my quiet, graceful exit into a jealous, hysterical meltdown, painting Gwen as the innocent collateral damage of my unreasonable insecurities. Gaslighting wasn't just Ruth's hobby. It was her native language. I deleted the voicemails and tossed my phone aside. Let them spin their little webs. I had a kitchen to run. The stainless steel prep counters of times the Iron Lily, times Vance's fiercely private, reservation-only bistro were a sanctuary. There were no ring lights here. No tripods for TikTok tutorials. Just the rhythmic, aggressive times, thwack, thwack, thwack times of my Nakiri knife turning a mound of shallots into translucent confetti. Vance leaned against the expediter pass, his massive frame comfortably taking up space. He wore a faded black apron, his dark eyes tracking the blinding speed of my blade. "You're dicing those like you're visualizing a specific carotid artery," he noted, his voice a low, gravelly hum over the simmering stockpots. "Just refining my brunoise, chef," I shot back, scraping the shallots into a stainless steel bowl with the spine of my knife. I didn't look up, but I could feel his smirk. Working with Vance was an exercise in telepathy. In Jude's kitchen, I was a ghost, doing the heavy lifting while he posed for the cameras. Here, Vance anticipated my movements. When I reached blindly for the finishing salt, he had already slid the ramekin inches from my fingertips. It was an infuriatingly intimate dance of mutual respect, something I hadn't tasted in a decade. "He's doubling down on your summer menu," Vance said, casually tossing a printed sheet onto my cutting board. It was a leaked press release. Jude was headlining the upcoming Culinary Arts Gala, promising a revolutionary tasting menu. My menu. I wiped my hands on a pristine side towel, a slow, predatory warmth blooming in my chest. Let him. A chef who doesn't understand the chemistry of his own recipes is just a waiter holding a pan. I pulled out a cheap burner phone I'd bought that morning. I didn't need to scream my truth from the rooftops. I just needed to plant a microscopic seed of doubt. Logging into an anonymous Reddit account, I navigated to the city's most ruthless fine dining forum. Under a thread praising Jude's upcoming debut, I typed a single comment. Funny how Chef Jude's flavor profiles completely changed overnight, almost like his ghostwriter finally quit. Wonder if his new signature truffle wagyu will taste like desperation or just plain plagiarism? Watch the emulsion, folks. It's going to split. Send. 3 days later, I received a formal, cream-colored invitation to my parents' 30th wedding anniversary dinner at the Oakwood Country Club. It was a trap, obviously. Ruth wanted an audience to publicly force my submission. I wore a backless crimson dress that screamed, "I don't give a damn," completely ruining the somber pity party aesthetic Ruth had carefully curated for the evening. When I strolled into the private dining room, the temperature plummeted. Gwen was clinging to Jude's arm, wearing a pale, oversized cashmere sweater to emphasize how frail she had become. Jude looked haggard, the dark circles under his eyes hinting that his kitchen prep wasn't going as smoothly as his Instagram claimed. "Brie," Ruth said, her voice tight, her eyes darting to the other wealthy family friends seated around the mahogany table. "How brave of you to join us." "I wouldn't miss it, Ruth." I smiled, taking my seat and smoothly signaling the sommelier for a pour of Pinot Noir. The dinner was a suffocating masterclass in passive aggression. Cutlery scraped against porcelain. Conversations were hushed. I ate my duck confit with absolute serenity, ignoring the venomous daggers Gwen kept shooting my way. As dessert was cleared, Ruth tapped her spoon against her crystal glass. She stood up, dabbing at her dry eyes with a silk napkin. "Paul, darling," she began, her voice quivering with perfectly calibrated emotion. "Before we toast to us, there is another blessing we need to share. After such a tumultuous week, our family is finally healing." She placed a hand over her heart, looking adoringly at Gwen. "Gwen is pregnant. She and Jude are expecting a baby." A collective gasp echoed around the table. My father's eyes widened, a mixture of shock and immediate calculation regarding his company shares crossing his face. Jude puffed out his chest, looking every bit the proud, responsible patriarch stepping up to the plate. "Oh, how wonderful," I purred, raising my wine glass high. The crimson liquid caught the chandelier light. To the happy couple, and to impeccable timing. At that exact, suspended second, Jude's phone buzzed aggressively against the wooden table. He glanced down, annoyed by the interruption. His thumb swiped the screen to view a message from an unknown number. I watched the micro-expressions ripple across his face. The pride vanished. The color drained from his cheeks, leaving him a sickening ashen gray. His jaw slackened. The hand holding his champagne flute began to tremble so violently that the bubbly spilled over the rim. He was staring at a high-resolution, time-stamped photograph. It showed a heavily disguised Gwen walking into the Vanguard prenatal clinic. The timestamp in the corner glowed brightly. October 14th, exactly 2 months ago. 2 months ago, Jude had been playing the devoted, monogamous fiancé to me. He hadn't even touched Gwen yet. The suffocating silence in the room stretched until it threatened to snap. Jude slowly, mechanically, turned his head to stare at Gwen's flat stomach, his eyes wide with a horrifying realization. I took a slow, deliberate sip of my wine. The game hadn't just changed. The board was officially flipped. Paranoia is a slow-acting poison. It doesn't kill you immediately. It just makes you question every shadow in the room, every whisper behind your back. I didn't stick around the Oakwood Country Club to watch Jude interrogate Gwen about her miraculous, mathematically impossible pregnancy. I didn't need to. The seed of absolute distrust had been planted, and I knew exactly how fast those two toxic weeds would choke each other out. Back at the Iron Lily, the air was clear. There were no lies here, just the honest heat of the line, the hiss of searing protein, and the sharp, bright scent of lemongrass and ginger. I was working on a yuzu-glazed black cod, finding my rhythm again. For a decade, my hands had only moved to make Jude look good. Now, every precise slice, every perfect sear belonged to me. Vance stood beside me, plating a charred octopus tentacle with a dark, glossy swipe of squid ink puree. He didn't hover, but his presence was a heavy, grounding anchor in the chaos of a busy dinner service. "Your sear is uneven," he murmured, his deep voice cutting through the clatter of the kitchen. He stepped closer, nudging my elbow a fraction of an inch to the left. "Don't rush the Maillard reaction. You control the fire, Brie, not the other way around." I adjusted my grip on the tongs, feeling a genuine unforced smile crack through my usual cynical armor. "Yes, chef. But the past doesn't stay buried just because you learn how to control the fire." It happened on a quiet, rainy Tuesday morning. Vance called me into his cramped, dimly lit office out back. Sitting on his battered oak desk was a thick manila envelope. "I asked a buddy in CyberSec to do some digging into Jude's financials," Vance said, leaning against the doorframe, his massive arms crossed. His voice was dangerously quiet, stripped of its usual dry humor. "You mentioned you thought your stepmother was hiding assets to squeeze your dad. They found something else." I wiped my hands on my apron and flicked open the flap. Inside were bank statements, phone logs, and a grainy traffic cam photograph. It took my brain a few grueling seconds to stitch the narrative together. It was a wire transfer. $50,000, routed from a shell company registered to Ruth, straight into the account of a man named Marcus Thorne. Marcus Thorne. The name hit me like a physical blow, driving the air from my lungs. He was the drunk driver who had pinned my car against a concrete barrier in my past life, crushing my hands into a useless, mangled pulp. The police had called it a tragic, booze-fueled accident. I flipped to the next page with numb fingers. Phone logs. The night of the crash, a burner phone had pinged a cell tower 3 blocks from the intersection. It had dialed Marcus Thorne exactly 2 minutes before impact. The burner was purchased with Jude's credit card. The air in the tiny office suddenly felt too thin to breathe. The humming of the refrigerator down the hall faded into a high-pitched ringing in my ears. It wasn't an accident. It was a hit. Ruth had paid for it to clear the path for Gwen's culinary scholarship, and Jude, my fiancé, the man I cooked for, bled for, loved, had literally guided the missile. They hadn't just stolen my recipes. They had planned to physically mutilate me. The paper slipped from my trembling fingers, scattering across the linoleum floor. My knees buckled. All the sarcastic armor, the cold detachment I had worn so proudly since my rebirth, shattered into a million pieces. A guttural, ugly sob tore from my throat. I wasn't just betrayed, I was hunted. Before I hit the ground, Vance caught me. He didn't say everything was going to be okay. He didn't offer cheap, hollow platitudes. He just wrapped his arms around me, pulling me tight against his chest, shielding me from the sheer horror of my own memories. "Brie, look at me," he commanded, his voice a low, fierce rumble against my ear. I looked up, my vision blurred with hot, angry tears. His dark eyes were absolute murder. "They aren't taking anything else from you, ever again," Vance promised, his grip on me tightening. "We are going to burn their entire world to ash, together." I buried my face in his chef's coat, gripping the fabric like a lifeline, and finally let myself cry for the girl who had died in that sterile hospital bed. While Vance was helping me rebuild my foundation, Jude was in a total free fall. My burner phone had been busy. Over the last week, I had been drip-feeding his paranoia, sending anonymous texts from untraceable internet numbers. "She's glowing, Jude. Are you sure the math adds up? Ask her where she was on the afternoon of the 14th. You aren't the only chef she's been tasting." He was already drowning under the pressure of the upcoming Culinary Arts Gala, desperately trying to decipher my sabotaged recipes. The texts pushed him right over the edge. He was a narcissist, and narcissists cannot fathom being made a fool of. On a brisk Friday afternoon, Gwen told him she was going to a prenatal yoga class. She kissed his cheek, playing the role of the devoted mother-to-be perfectly. Jude didn't go to his restaurant. He got into his car and followed her Uber. He didn't know I was 3 cars behind him, Vance at the wheel, watching the rat navigate the maze I had built. Gwen didn't go to a yoga studio. She went to a mid-range apartment complex on the east side. Jude parked illegally, his face a mask of sweating, twitching rage as he watched her key herself into the lobby. I had spent $500 to hire a struggling theater actor named Leo. His instructions were beautifully simple. Invite Gwen over under the guise of an exclusive luxury baby brand sponsorship. Pour her some sparkling cider, and the exact moment the door opens, look incredibly guilty. Jude didn't even bother buzzing up. He slipped through the lobby door behind a delivery guy and took the stairs 2 at a time. Vance and I sat in the idling car, watching the 3rd-floor window. "Think he'll knock?" Vance asked, a dark smirk playing on his lips. "Jude prefers to make an entrance," I replied, checking my watch. Right on cue, we saw the silhouette of the apartment door violently kick open. Inside, Jude stood panting in the doorway, staring at the scene I had orchestrated. There was his pregnant fiancé, sitting intimately close to a handsome, athletic stranger on a plush velvet sofa. Leo, earning every single penny of his fee, immediately jumped up, hands raised in feigned panic, knocking over 2 crystal glasses. "Who the hell is this, Gwen?" Jude roared, his voice carrying all the way down to the street. Gwen shrieked, dropping her designer bag. "Jude, it's not what it looks like." I leaned back in the leather passenger seat, rolling the window up to block out the screaming. Checkmate. The Vanguard Culinary Arts Gala was less about food and more about who had the best PR crisis management team. Flashbulbs popped like cheap firecrackers as the city's elite filtered into the grand exhibition hall. Jude and Gwen walked the red carpet like a pair of glossy, terrified porcelain dolls. You would never guess that just 48 hours ago, Jude had kicked down an apartment door to find Gwen sharing an overpriced cider with a handsome stranger. Now, Gwen was gripping Jude's arm with white-knuckled desperation, her fabricated maternity glow looking suspiciously like cold sweat and heavy concealer. They needed this win. Jude's investors were breathing down his neck, threatening to pull his funding, and his restaurant's Yelp rating was currently tanking thanks to my relentless, anonymous Reddit campaign. Inside the hall, the competition kitchens were set up like gladiatorial arenas in gleaming stainless steel. Vance and I occupied Station 4, representing Time's The Iron Lily. We were a quiet, lethal unit. No cameras, no frantic posing for the livestream. Just me, Vance, and a meticulously prepped menu that didn't rely on stolen valor. Across the aisle at Station 1, Jude was sweating through his pristine, custom-embroidered chef's coat. He caught my eye as he unpacked his premium ingredients. He offered a smug, arrogant chin lift, tapping the leather-bound notebook resting right on his prep counter. My Times notebook. The absolute idiot actually brought the murder weapon to the crime scene. I gave him a sweet, vacuous smile, picking up my boning knife, and went back to breaking down a quail. Let the games begin. The challenge was a highly publicized 5-course tasting menu, culminating in a signature meat dish. Jude was banking his entire sinking career on my truffle wagyu with bone marrow emulsion. It had been a masterpiece in my past life, earning him endless accolades while I scrubbed pans in the back. But in this life, 3 hours before I walked out of that apartment, I had taken a very fine-tipped pen and altered the chemistry of that specific recipe. I had swapped the lipid stabilizer in the marrow emulsion and tweaked the acidic wine reduction. If cooked exactly as written, the moment the emulsion hit the residual heat of the wagyu, it wouldn't glaze. It would split, curdle, and violently separate into a greasy, gray, metallic-tasting sludge. I watched from the corner of my eye as Jude barked frantic orders at his terrified sous chefs. He wasn't tasting as he went. He wasn't adjusting for humidity or heat. He was just blindly, desperately following my sabotaged map. Vance bumped his broad shoulder against mine, handing me a pair of tweezers to carefully plate our micro cilantro. He's about to plate. Vance murmured, his voice a low dark hum of pure anticipation. Watch the sauce. I paused, wiping my hands on a side towel, and leaned casually against my prep station. Jude grabbed his heavy copper saucepan and confidently poured the bone marrow emulsion over the perfectly seared, absurdly expensive wagyu. For exactly 2 seconds, it looked brilliant. A glossy, rich finish. Then, the pH imbalance hit the hot fat. The sauce seized. The beautiful sheen violently curdled, separating into pools of murky yellow oil and lumpy grayish solids right in front of his eyes. Jude froze. The color instantly drained from his face as he stared at the ruined plates. The giant digital countdown clock above us flashed 10 seconds. He had absolutely no time to remake it. "Hands up, chefs!" the head judge boomed over the PA system. The tasting panel was a row of ruthless food critics, investors, and Michelin inspectors. They started with us. Vance and I presented a flawless butter-poached quail with a smoked vanilla and parsnip puree. The judges closed their eyes in silent, reverent approval. We didn't just cook, we communicated. Then, the panel moved like a firing squad to Station 1. Jude presented his dish with a smile so tight and panicked, his face looked like it might shatter. The head judge, a terrifyingly blunt culinary legend, dragged his silver fork through the split, curdled oil slick on the plate. He didn't even bother to hide his sneer of disgust. He took a microscopic bite, chewed exactly once, and immediately grabbed a cloth napkin to spit it out. "Chef Jude," the judge said, his voice echoing through the microphone, dripping with absolute professional contempt. "This is a culinary disaster. The emulsion is completely broken. The taste is incredibly bitter, almost metallic. It is amateurish. What on earth happened here?" Panic seized Jude's eyes. The broadcast cameras aggressively zoomed in on his sweating, pale face. True to his cowardly form, the narcissist immediately looked for a human shield. "It was my sous chef," Jude stammered, pointing a shaking finger at the young culinary student shrinking beside him. "He messed up the temperature control on the reduction. I told him to watch the heat. It's completely his fault." He didn't get to finish throwing the kid under the bus. Suddenly, the gentle ambient jazz in the exhibition hall cut out with a harsh, ear-piercing screech of static. The massive digital screens flanking the main stage flickered, dropping the live feed of the kitchens entirely. Instead, a crystal-clear, booming audio recording flooded the dead-silent hall. Vance's cybersecurity friend had been worth his weight in white truffles, successfully pulling the audio from a hacked security camera inside Jude's own office from 3 days ago. I don't even know what half this chemistry crap means. It was Jude's voice, echoing off the high ceilings, furious and arrogant. But who cares? Brie left the book. We just follow her exact instructions, and I take the credit. It's not like that mousy bitch had the face for television anyway. And Gwen, please. She's useful for her dad's money right now, but the girl is dumber than a box of rocks. I'll dump her the second the restaurant expands. The entire hall erupted in a tidal wave of gasps. Gwen, sitting in the front row VIP section, covered her mouth, her face turning a sickly, mottled shade of gray as every single camera in the room violently pivoted to her. Jude stumbled backward, literally knocking over a stack of porcelain plates that shattered loudly on the floor, his eyes darting frantically toward the raised AV booth at the back of the room. But the person standing by the soundboard, holding the microphone cable, wasn't a confused technician. It was an older man in a sharply tailored suit, his posture rigid, his face and mask of cold, disgusted fury. I had sent him the files. I had meticulously peeled back Ruth's lies and showed him the wire transfers, the hit-and-run setup, and the absolute rot masquerading as his family. It was my father, Paul. He had finally woken up, and he was looking directly at Jude. The fallout wasn't an explosion. It was a surgical extraction. My father didn't yell when the audio finished echoing through the silent exhibition hall. He didn't flip a table or cause a public scene. He just stared at Jude, then looked at Gwen, who was hyperventilating in the front row. Paul walked over to her, his face a mask of absolute chilling indifference. "Dad," "Please," Gwen sobbed, her voice cracking as she reached for his tailored sleeve. "It's a misunderstanding. Brie set us up." He didn't even flinch. He just looked down at her like she was a stain on his expensive rug. "You have 24 hours to vacate my house. Do not take a single item you did not purchase with your own money." By Monday morning, Ruth's carefully constructed empire of lies had completely evaporated. My father's lawyers were terrifyingly efficient. They froze the joint accounts, revoked the platinum credit cards, and served Ruth with divorce papers so thick they could choke a horse. She tried her usual, Oscar-worthy routine, weeping hysterically on the marble foyer floor, threatening to swallow a bottle of sleeping pills, gasping for air. But Paul just stepped right over her trembling body to retrieve his golf clubs. The manipulation only works when the audience still believes the illusion. Once the curtain drops, it's just pathetic noise. Jude's descent was even steeper, a glorious, unmitigated freefall. The Vanguard Culinary Association didn't just strip him of his rising star status. They permanently blacklisted him. You can recover from a bad review. You can recover from a burnt dish. You cannot recover from a viral, high-definition audio clip of you admitting to stealing your fiancé's recipes and calling your elite investors gullible, deep-pocketed idiots. The lucrative endorsement deals evaporated overnight, instantly replaced by multi-million-dollar breach of contract lawsuits that drained his accounts dry. He and Gwen were socially radioactive. Their wealthy friends blocked their numbers. The PR firms stopped answering their frantic emails. They were forced to move out of Jude's luxury penthouse and into a cramped, depressing studio apartment on the gritty edge of the city. The pressure cooker of their fake, parasite-host relationship finally exploded. I didn't have to lift a single finger. I didn't need to hire thugs or cut their brake lines. I just sat back and let their own greed consume them. I heard the final act through the industry grapevine. Jude, drowning in insurmountable debt and cheap, bottom-shelf bourbon, caught Gwen trying to pawn his last remaining asset, a vintage gold Rolex. The argument turned ugly. The venom they had always reserved for me was finally turned on each other. It got physical. In the desperate, pathetic struggle over a piece of jewelry, Gwen was violently shoved. She fell hard against the sharp edge of a glass coffee table. The miscarriage wasn't a tragedy. It was the inevitable, rotting fruit of their toxic union. The baby, whoever the real father actually was spared a lifetime of being a pawn for two narcissistic monsters. Jude was arrested for the assault, dragged out of the cheap apartment in handcuffs by the police. Gwen was left with nothing but hospital bills she couldn't afford and a body as broken as her spirit. 365 days. That's exactly how long it takes for the Earth to rotate around the sun, and for a dead girl to conquer the culinary world. I stood in the softly lit, bustling dining room of Aura, my brand new flagship restaurant in the heart of the city's wealthiest district. The reservations were booked out for the next 2 years. The Michelin inspectors had already paid a very quiet, very impressed visit, and the whispers of our first star were already circulating in the press. I wasn't hiding in the suffocating shadows of the prep kitchen anymore. I wore a tailored, blindingly white chef's coat with my name elegantly embroidered in gold thread over my heart. Executive Chef Brie. Vance walked up behind me, wrapping his massive arms around my waist and pressing a warm, lingering kiss to my temple. He smelled like wood smoke, expensive cologne, and safety. "Table 7 is practically weeping over your truffle, wagyu," he murmured, his deep voice vibrating against my shoulder, a dark, private smirk playing on his lips. "Tell them to save their tears for the dessert course." I smiled, leaning back into his solid embrace, feeling the heavy, comforting weight of his presence. We had built this empire on truth, blistering heat, and absolute mutual respect. There were no shadows here, only light. Outside, the city was being lashed by a brutal, freezing November downpour. The warm, golden glow of Aura spilled out onto the wet pavement, a beacon of untouchable luxury and success. Across the street, shivering in the mouth of a dark, garbage-strewn alleyway, a woman huddled under a torn plastic poncho. Her clothes were filthy, hanging off a gaunt, sickly frame. Gwen. She rummaged desperately through a waterlogged recycling bin, her dirty, chipped fingernails scraping against the wet plastic. Her hand brushed against a glossy magazine someone had tossed away to avoid the rain. Epicurean Digest. Gwen pulled it out with trembling hands. The flickering orange streetlight illuminated the cover. It was a high-resolution, full-page portrait of me. I was smiling a radiant, genuinely happy, effortless smile, standing shoulder to shoulder with Vance in our pristine, state-of-the-art kitchen. The bold headline read, "The True Genius Behind the Fire: How Chef Brie Redefined Modern Fine Dining." Gwen stared at the cover. The freezing rain plastered her matted hair to her face, stinging the raw, infected scratches she had compulsively dug into her own cheeks over the last year of paranoia and despair. Her hollow, sunken eyes locked onto my smile. She didn't have a wealthy father to cry to anymore. She didn't have a handsome rising star chef to steal. She didn't have a fragile victim narrative left to spin to a sympathetic audience. She had absolutely nothing but the suffocating, crushing, inescapable weight of her own envy. A guttural, animalistic wail tore from her throat, swallowed instantly by the roaring thunder. She collapsed against the cold, unforgiving brick wall, clutching my smiling face to her chest, sobbing hysterically into the freezing mud. She was finally exactly where she belonged,